All right, everybody, thanks for joining in. This time around, we're doing something a little bit different. This is, we've kind of talked just between the two of us off air about some different themed episodes that we wanted to do, and one of the kind of offshoots we wanted to give a shot was one of the topics that we talk about on here, actually probably quite a bit. Not necessarily as much as John Carpenter or Halloween, but we do talk about horror hosts quite a bit. We both are huge Svengoolie fans, but there are a plethora of other horror hosts out there as well. And it's kind of a weird time in horror host history, because not only has Svengoolie been going strong for 85 years or whatever it's been, but now you have the resurgence of streaming, not only on Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and all that stuff, but you have, I know that there's a couple of different horror hosts that like stream live on Facebook like every week, but Joe Bob Briggs has the last drive-in on a weekly series on Shudder that, technically officially started. Well, this was a second week, so a couple weeks ago, but he did a couple of marathons over the past couple of years. And we'd always talked about we should not only review a movie, but we should watch an episode or whatever you want to call it of a horror host talking about a movie and the movie itself, if that makes sense, if I didn't lose anybody there. So with Joe Bob Briggs's new show on Shudder, we decided that, hey, let's go ahead and tackle this now. And we are talking about one of the recent episodes. I don't know if episode is the right word for that, but I don't know what else you would call a weekly serial or whatever.
I think episode's right. Yeah, because it would be like, if you were to like find that on Shudder, it would be under like a episode 1 or 2 or whatever.
Oh yeah, I think you're right. Yep. But anyway, Joe Bob Briggs covered Q The Winged Serpent this past Friday night, and so we decided, hey, let's cover that. So here we are talking about the 1982 Larry Cohen movie Q The Winged Serpent and Joe Bob Briggs.
Well, I want to first start off by saying I was really, really excited to know that I got to watch a Joe Bob Briggs episode. I guess it's what you call it, like real time, right? Because, it's like, it starts at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. And it was kind of cool because I turned it, I watched it in my bedroom, lay down in my bed, turned on the TV. And it was like maybe 10 or 15 minutes till the show, and they had this little screen that basically had the backdrop of the Joe Bob Briggs show and some crickets chirping in the background, and it had a little clock at the bottom kind of telling you, like, how many more minutes until the show starts. So that to me was kind of exciting because, you and I are Svengoolie fans, and, really you get Svengoolie every Saturday, but to have another horror host that plays some of the more, I don't know, I guess like the more later horror movies, the ones that we grew up with, like from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, that was that's pretty cool because, you watch Svengoolie and yeah, he's great and all, but there's only so many Universal Monster movies you can watch. So it was kind of cool to do that and, sit back, grab a nice Texas beer and give it a whirl.
For those of you that are of a certain age, you guys all remember Joe Bob from back in the, 80s and 90s, all the way into, I think, really, he probably went to, like, the mid-2000s, didn't he? I think, or even 2010, 2011, something like that.
Honestly, I really don't know much about him. I don't know about the history of his show at all, really. I think I, maybe remember, stopping on it a few times when I was channel surfing back in the 90s, but I remember TNT's Monster Vision and that was sort of like a horror show. I don't know that they had a host though. And then I remember all the,
Well, he was the host on that for a while. Yep.
Oh, he was.
Yep.
Okay. Well, then maybe that's like his logo now looks very similar to that. So maybe that's kind of what I was. Again, I was never like at that time, the 90s, I really wasn't watching many horror like hosted shows, or it wasn't something that was really on my radar. So yeah, so I really, when I heard about him, it was like maybe I had like faint memories of knowing who he was, but like I wasn't like one of his old fans from back in the day. But then as I got to read up on him and see what he was doing and check him out, it was like almost like I kind of instantly became a fan. It was kind of weird.
I remember being a kid and he had a show on the movie channel, and it was sort of similar to his show on Shudder a little bit, because the movie channel was a paid cable channel. So of course he was allowed to, he could show like unedited horror movies on there. And then he moved from the movie channel over to TNT for Monster Vision. And I remember seeing some Monster Vision episodes, but again, you always had those edited for TV movies that were on those channels. Those are cable channels, but they weren't pay channels, so for one reason or another, they weren't ever really allowed to show unedited stuff, which I never really understood. I mean, you're paying for it anyway, but anyway, it is what it is. This never made sense. Oh, I'm paying an extra $5 a month for HBO, so I can see boobies on this channel, but I can't over here. But anyway, yeah, and then now this thing on Shudder, his new show on Shudder, The Last Drive-In, it's really cool to see a movie, in whether it's a movie that doesn't necessarily need to be edited that much, or I shouldn't say need to be edited that much, but if you were to watch it on regular television, if it would really be edited that much, some of these older like 70s movies and stuff, unless there's nudity or something in it, I don't think they really get edited too much for mainstream television nowadays. But it is cool to see some, like this Q movie that was on the other day. In the beginning, there is one real quick nudity scene, so it is kind of cool to be watching a horror theme or a horror hosted movie, but you're still getting the actual whole movie. It's not like when you're watching Svengoolie, and I mean, the movies that Svengoolie plays anymore, it's not like those are really edited anyway, but it's not like he's like, oh, there's going to be a monster in this next scene. It might be troubling to some people.
Yeah, it is cool to see these classic horror movies that are a little newer than what we get on Svengoolie. So it's definitely a different version of the horror host. And this movie Q, it's kind of funny because, we had talked about, you and I had said, okay, we need to do a Joe Bob Briggs episode. And so we said, okay, well, whatever he plays next Friday, that's what we're going to do. So Friday came, and I'm sitting here getting ready to show. And then he says, yep, okay, today's episode is going to be, we're going to watch Q. And I was like, oh, crap. I got to sit through Q because like I remember Q. Now I never saw it all the way through, but I remember as, going back to cable, when my family first got cable back in like 82 or 83 or whenever that was, Q was like Q, Psycho 2, and oh gosh, I'm trying to think of what other movies were non-stop playing. Well, those two, for whatever reason, I remember the most. Like Psycho and Jaws 3D, I know shortly after that one was played all the time. But I remember Q was it was one of those HBO movies where they never stopped playing it. It was always on. And I remember watching bits and pieces of it and thinking, this is, it's just kind of boring. And, I was a little kid at the time, so, I didn't want to sit through any dialogue or narrative or anything like that. I just wanted to see a monster. But I don't even remember really seeing the monster as a kid. So it was kind of cool to sit back and get a chance to see it all the way through and see what I didn't see back then. Then I do remember seeing it too at the mom and pop video stores, the box art for Q, which was like they show the monster. And it was like a painting or something, like a drawing of it. It wasn't like a still from the movie or anything. So I was like, okay, whatever. I'll give it a shot. You know, we got to do this. I gotta sit through this. And I'll be honest with you, starting from the very beginning of the film up until the very end, I was pleasantly surprised. I was literally entertained through the whole thing.
I don't know if I would necessarily say that I was entertained through the whole thing. But yeah, it was. This was definitely, as we've kind of started coining the term, a horror-hosted movie.
Yes,
This definitely would fall into that category. And if this particular movie would not have been on Joe Bob Briggs's show, I cannot say that. Well, I mean, first of all, this wouldn't have been something I would have come across and been like, oh, I got to watch that. But if it was on, I can't say that I would actually leave it on and just sit there and watch it through. One of the cool things with the Shudder is if you don't have Shudder, then you haven't heard of this before. Or if you have Shudder through like Amazon Prime, you're missing out on this as well. But Shudder has this on the app. They have this thing called Shudder TV. And it's kind of cool when you just turn on, like if you're watching it on your television, you just open the Shudder app and it just starts playing something randomly. And I think it probably just feeds through a loop all the time. So it's actually kind of cool. It's like just watching a movie or a television channel. Mm-hmm. And so that is kind of cool. But like I was saying, like if I flipped on the Shudder app and it said like Q The Winged Serpent currently playing, I'd have been like, oh, okay. And I would have probably clicked off of it right away.
Right.
Because typically, at least in my personal definition of like, oh, this is a horror hosted movie. This is a movie where there are certain things that you're like, oh, okay, that was pretty cool. But you're sitting through it to get to the next horror host segment because the movie's not bad enough to just outright turn it off, but it's not necessarily good enough that you would watch it on its own.
Yeah, it's definitely a bad movie, as in a B movie. You know, it's got that really, it's the low budget feel to it. Obviously, when you see the monster for sure, but it has this bizarre like keeps your attention. You know what it reminds me of? Funny enough, both movies have David Carradine. Was the movie Trick or Treats that we reviewed not too long ago? And that was another terrible movie that somehow kept my attention. Like I would never like say like, oh, that's a classic, or you got to go out and see Trick or Treats. But like same with Q. It's just like one of those films where you just kind of you get started with it and like it kept me entertained, and I don't know why. I mean, it was just like the way it was shot, and the ridiculousness of the storyline was cool enough. But so I guess should we give him a little idea of what we're talking about with Q? What this is?
Sure.
So basically, it's Manhattan, right? We're talking.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So, and it's the city, and there's this giant lizard creature that with wings, like a giant reptilian bird that is like basically going around from rooftop to rooftop and eating people. So it eats construction workers, it eats window washers, it eats nude sunbathers, it eats people that jump in the pools. I mean, it's just basically a monster bird that's like flying around town and like attacking people. And so we get this guy, this character. I guess he's sort of like a criminal. He's like, because it starts off with like it was kind of funny because Joe Bob Briggs does a good job of breaking down like the first 15 minutes of the movie, and he like explains everything that's in it. Like there's a jewelry store robbery, there's a decapitation, there's a two breasts or whatever. He goes like throughout like the whole list of things that what to expect to see in the first part of the movie, and he's right. Like it's like just completely jam packed with all this crazy stuff going on. But anyhow, so it's about this guy, and he ends up stealing some diamonds and loses the diamonds on the way of running away from the police. And so his partners who are with him, they like think he still has the diamonds, so they're tracking him down, and they want to rough him up because they think he stole from them. And anyhow, he finds in this old building, he finds that there's this nest basically, and there's like an egg in there, and that's where this like reptilian bird creature like goes to. And meanwhile, like, the bird, we see like scenes of this lizard bird like going through town and killing people like on the rooftops. And some pretty cool aerial shots too, like obviously like in a helicopter. They got some good shots there, and it's sort of like supposed to be the point of view of the bird. And then there's David Carradine is like the New York police officer who's investigating the crimes. And there's some pretty funny scenes in there where basically, like people get decapitated, but they can't find the heads. And Joe Bob Briggs does a good job of like, doing a few lines on that.
I will say the one thing with Joe Bob compared to like Svengoolie is Joe Bob actually he does a really good job of giving you in-depth explanations of like the movie itself, like different things that were made or different things about the making of the movie. And yeah, like you had said too, like does a really good job of like breaking stuff down, whether it's good or bad. Like I know when he was talking about what was that movie from last weekend that he was talking about? Chud, which he was not a fan of at all, and he made it blatantly obvious during that episode. He was like, "This movie's a piece of shit." But yeah, like in this one, he does a really good job of like breaking everything down. Unlike and this is like one of the things, unfortunately, like Svengoolie doesn't really get into that sort of detail with stuff. I mean, really, with Svengoolie, it's always like, oh, so in this movie you have the cop who was David Carradine, and he was in this movie, and this movie, and this movie. And then you had this other guy who was this other thing, and he was in this movie and this movie. And then, the one thing when you're ever watching an episode of Svengoolie is he always picks like a couple like random people from the movie too. Where he's like, oh, and the guy that was the guy in the background putting the quarter in the parking meter in the one shot there, you might recognize him as the barber in Miracle on 34th Street. Like, what? But, right. Joe Bob does a really good job, and I'm sure that he does a ton of research, and when I say he does a ton of research, I'm sure he's got people on staff of his show that do a ton of research, and a lot of that stuff he's probably either reading off of cards or, reads through it before the show. Because, I mean, there's some of that stuff you're like, why would you have all of that knowledge in your head at any given time?
Right. Yeah, he does a good job of breaking it down, talking about it. One of the things I thought was cool that he explains about with Q was that, this was a low-budget film, and he explains how David Carradine basically seemed like he got conned into doing the film. His buddy, was the director saying, yeah, I'm doing this film. I'd like you to come down, blah, blah, blah. And like kind of Carradine didn't want to do a monster movie, but it was like too late. But then another thing I thought was kind of cool, Joe Bob Briggs explains, is that they filmed the entire movie, and then they hired the creature effects team, and then the creature effects team was like basically like, just give us a screenplay and we'll tell you, like where we can put the monster and how to shoot this. And then like the director was like, you guys don't understand. We already shot the movie. You're just going to have to put the monster in, in the shots that we already filmed. So that was kind of funny.
If you wouldn't have known that, you would have never known.
And the monster too. It's this is early '80s, so this is pre-CGI, so it's your classic claymation. It's like and you could tell it's like the stop motion kind of thing going on there with the clay sculptures and it's very similar to It's funny. I was thinking like Ghostbusters, was one of those movies with like one of those really big time blockbuster hits that has some serious claymation scenes, with the gargoyles and stuff. Yeah, the effects are very similar in with that. So probably in the early '80s, you saw this like bird flying around the city of Manhattan, and it's like you're probably like, wow, that's pretty cool.
What did he say too? Like they filmed this movie like in what was it, like 2 weeks or something?
Oh, some crazy amount of time, yeah.
Yeah, it was. I mean, he tells the whole story about it. I won't get into the whole story, but yeah, it's just kind of funny, like the amount of detail that he can get into with some of this stuff. And honestly, I say, he's probably got people doing this research. Maybe he doesn't, because I mean, like, listen to us two, 40-something-year-olds go on about stuff that we love, and, we can do the same thing about certain things. It's just amazing when you see somebody do it about, you can do it every week, twice a week, every week, because it is a double feature every week.
Yeah. Yeah. He's one thing too that sold me on Joe Bob was, when I first signed up for Shudder, I was, tracking through his episodes, and he had the Thanksgiving special that he played, this past Thanksgiving. He had like a season there that you can watch a bunch of movies on. And I think the first movie he played was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and he kind of introed that movie as I think he said it was the best movie ever made. I'm like, okay, I'm sold. This guy knows what he's talking about. So I was pretty much a fan right at that point. But yeah, he's a wealth of information. He's got a lot to say. That's the one thing too about his hosting. You definitely are going to get a lot in between the movies. He's definitely going to talk a lot. He's going to share a lot. He's got a lot to say. He's not just a quick, couple of one-liners and that's it. Yeah, there's a lot going on with and a lot of opinions, and he'll kind of carry it into something else, and he'll even get a little political sometimes, or he'll get a little bit, he'll talk about, maybe some current events, and he'll connect that to the movie somehow. But he's very, very informative, and like you said, he knows all the history of these films. He really understands them.
It's kind of funny because my wife thinks, I can't remember what movie I was watching on there. Oh, it was Hellraiser. He had an episode with Hellraiser from one of his marathons, and my youngest daughter wanted to see Hellraiser for some reason. I don't know if she had read the Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker or something, or she just heard about it, but she was like, hey, do you have Hellraiser on VHS? And I was like, I do. But I was flipping through Shudder, and I was like, but it's on Shudder. If you want to watch it on there, that'd be kind of cool. We can watch it. And so she was like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, let's do that. And then I turned it on, and like, the opening is always like a good 15 minutes or so. And then he stops in every like 15, 20 minutes in the movie, and he goes for another, a good, at least 2 or 3 minutes, sometimes, a little bit longer than that. And halfway through the movie, my wife just like, holy crap, does this guy ever shut up? He's just a big windbag. I'm like, it's Joe Bob. This is his thing. This is what he does.
Oh, that's so funny. It's funny that, you know what's funny about that is like, did your wife understand that it's a hosted horror show?
Oh yeah, yep.
Because there's this lady that works with me, and she's one of our secretaries, and her adult son, like I was telling her about Svengoolie, and so she watched it one week, and like her son, who was probably in his like early to mid 20s, like couldn't understand the Svengoolie show, because he was like, man, every time I'm trying to watch this movie, this guy pops up and like won't shut up. He's like keeps talking. I don't get it. Why is this guy on here all the time? His mom was trying to explain it. Yeah, this is, back in the day, this is how it was. There was, you'd get this guy that would host the show and kind of talk you through the movie. So I was just wondering if maybe your wife didn't realize it was like.
Oh no, she. But I don't think. It wasn't that she didn't understand it. I mean, she was probably not like. She wasn't like, what the hell is he doing? She was more like, shut up already so we can get back to the movie.
Yeah, he does. But yeah, Joe Bob definitely takes his time.
In that movie, ugh. Yep, when that... Did we do an episode on Hellraiser? I think we did.
I don't think we did.
But, and I know I've told it on here before, that Hellraiser has one of my most cringe-worthy scenes in horror history.
Oh, yeah, maybe we did.
When they're taking the mattress up the stairs and the guy catches the back of his hand on the nail sticking out of the wall. Which, I mean, honestly, like, it's really not that gruesome, but it's still from when I was a kid and seeing that and just like, oh my God. That even when I was watching it the other day, I was like, okay, here comes the scene. And like, sure, you know, like as the hand is getting closer to the nail, I'm like, ugh! And they're like, it's not that bad. I'm like, it's horrible. Shut up.
Is that, now let me ask you this. What's worse, the Hellraiser nail scene or the Pet Cemetery scalpel to the Achilles heel scene?
Oh, the back of the hand to the nail scene for sure.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Okay. And I think part of that too is because, like, you know, I've like scraped my hands on stuff before, so I kind of know what that feels like. Now I've cut myself of course before too, but I've never like cut a tendon like all the way through, so I can't really say I know what that feels like. So I can't really, like, I know like that would hurt, but I've never had any problems with my Achilles heels or my Achilles tendons before.
Right.
So, and I know people that have had them, you know, torn or whatever, sporting accidents and stuff. So, I mean, I'm sure to those people, they're like, oh my God, that's horrible. But yeah, to me, man, that Hellraiser scene, every time I see that, I'm like, ugh. Just one of those things. You know, that's the thing. Like when you watch, like when you're watching Friday the 13th, and you know Pamela Voorhees gets her head chopped off. Like that doesn't bug me. Somebody gets blown in half. That doesn't bug me. Somebody gets shot in a movie. That doesn't bug me. You know, somebody gets a limb cut off with a machete. Doesn't bug me. But you have somebody like, you know, gets a fingernail torn off, and I'm like, Jesus, why are you showing that?
Yeah, it's funny how that works.
You know, or the if you ever you don't see it too much in horror movies, but whenever you're watching stuff like online, you know, you see all this stuff all the time online of people doing stupid stuff, and anytime anybody gets hit in the balls on videos, I mean, it's just like every time, like get like a warm feeling in my gut, like almost like I'm anticipating like having that feeling coming on.
So do you struggle with the Wolfman scene in Monster Squad?
No, not so much. Oh
well.
Man, Monster Squad.
Great movie. I almost want to watch it tonight now.
Wow, did we get sidebarred there? Whew.
We did. So anyhow, that shows you how bad the movie Q is. But it's bad in a good way. So it's bad in the sense that you really definitely need a horror host to help you out through this film, because it's a terrible movie, but it's enjoyable in the sense that it keeps you going, and then you get a break from it with Joe Bob Briggs telling you about it and telling you some other stuff. And I think, like you had said, and many times prior, like with some of the other movies that we've reviewed over the past, I don't know, going back to like Trick or Treats, that comes up a lot in my mind, is like that would have been perfect for Joe Bob Briggs, because it's a terrible movie, but it's somehow still entertaining, and it would be even better if he came in and popped in and, you know, broke it up a little bit and said, you know, told us all the background story as to why David Carradine chose to do that crappy movie too.
I can't say that there's a David Carradine movie that I would ever be like, oh, I gotta see that movie.
You know what? This is kind of a weird connection here, and I probably has no connection whatsoever. But for some reason, I'm thinking David Carradine is like Nick Castle, not Nick Castle. Here I am, like just by accident, I connected all this to Halloween. No, Nicolas Cage is like the modern day David Carradine. Okay, so Did you hear the story about him? Like, I don't know if it's true or not, but basically, well, I know it's true. Like, if you go on Netflix, like pretty much every other movie is like a Nicolas Cage movie. And I heard that the reason that he's doing so many movies right now is because he's in so much like financial trouble. Like, he's in so much debt because he bought like a whole crap load of houses all over the world, and because he became this big movie star. But then now he's like, I think he's like in the red, or was. So he has to like constantly be making movies just to kind of catch up with his finances. So anyhow, if you go on Netflix and take a look at pretty much every movie on there, it's like a Nick Cage movie.
So David Carradine was the same way back in the 80s.
I'm guessing because he was in Trick or Treats and he was in Q. So
he was in 2 movies, so he must have been in every other one.
He must have had some debts to pay.
Could have been. Well, what was the show that he was on? Kung Fu or whatever?
Yeah, and I never watched it, so I don't know. Like David. Oh, and he was in Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2. So that.
Yep. And then he hung himself while he was jerking off.
Oh, he did. That's right. I forgot about that completely.
The dark paths that this show takes sometimes, I tell you.
I hope that doesn't happen to Nick Cage.
Did you ever think when you were prepping for this episode that we were going to be talking about autoerotic asphyxiation today?
No, I wasn't. And that's, it's the weird thing about that is I totally forgot about that. Again, I'm not a huge Carradine fan, and I don't really know much about him. He seems like one of those like actors that you hear about all the time, or was always mentioned, or was always, involved in something. And then like when you watch some of his movies and you're kind of like, huh? Well, it's the guy in Q.
I'm going to go ahead and say that I give... How are we doing this here? I guess we didn't really talk about this. Are we rating the movie, or are we rating the overall experience? I guess we're rating the overall experience, since that's how we kind of decided to do this episode. So I'm going to go ahead and give Joe Bob Briggs's Q episode, I'm going to go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If it was just the movie alone, I wouldn't give it a thumbs up, but Joe Bob has earned the thumbs up for sure.
Well, I will absolutely, definitely agree with you there that with Joe Bob, you have to give it a thumbs up. I will also say that the movie in and of itself, I will give a thumbs up too. Strangely enough, I was entertained with it, as we've talked about. I would also say if you do happen to pick this movie up and you're not a member of Shudder, and you're looking for, you pick it up on, I don't know where it would be, maybe an old VHS tape or something. I recommend grabbing some beer and popcorn for this as well. I think it works well as like the horror host / beer and popcorn film. So if you don't got the horror host, you better have the beer and popcorn.